Welcome to the new episode of the Dakota Boys Talk Movies. Another pandemic edition. We have Dakota on the line. Dakota, would you like to say anything?
I hope this ends soon because I'm tired of reading Stephen King.
Yeah, he's talking about the pandemic he hopes ends soon. Not this episode, but yeah, he's Dakota trapped in his home with only Stephen King books, trying to find the light.
Yeah. I've
Man.
basically broken up my reading of Stephen King with episodes of Tiger King, and let me tell you,
Oh my gosh.
it's like jumping from one giant mess to the other. Let me tell you.
That Carol Baskin.
Just we're completely off topic. I
Always.
thought this show was like a mockumentary, like something Stephen Guest would have made, like if he was
Christopher Guest.
Christopher Guest.
Yeah.
He was working with the Coen brothers. But it's real, and I'm just like, this is a documentary. These people exist.
Man. These people exist. Oh man.
And now all of a sudden my life doesn't seem so bad.
Oh shoot. That's funny. But yeah, so here we are. Dakota's on the phone. Gonna hang in there with us. And since we really, I mean, there's still new movies out there, but you're just not probably going to go to the theaters to see them because either you're in a totalitarian state or it's just not advised or it's closed. So here we are. So tonight what we're going to do is, since we're in one of those nice even years like 2020, we're going to go back and just talk about movies from a specific year, but since we're in like I said, a nice even multiple of 10 year, we're going to go back to 1990 on this episode, to that wonderful year. Dakota, what do you remember about 1990?
Yes.
I remember a world trying to redefine itself, and it took a few more years, where really 1990 and 1991 still felt like the 80s in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I was living in a probably more rural area than you were, so I just remember a lot of jeans, a lot of button-up plaid shirts.
But it was like those through-hole jeans with like 3-foot zippers.
all the women had the big hair. The cool guys had the Firebird with the I don't know, that weird kind of pre-mullet, whatever that looked like.
Yeah,
had a perm almost.
Or would it be like a neo mullet? Is that, or is like, I think we're done with the mullet, but I'm not done with the mullet? Kind of. I don't know. I think we'll just call it neo mullet. I know what you mean though.
Whatever that hairstyle Rowdy Piper was
Yeah.
had in They Live. That's what a lot of guys had.
Oh, yes. I could think of so many. I have so many vivid memories right now of so many different guys I could look at and just be like, yes, that hair. Oh, it's either wonderful or beautiful, depending on your body type, if you're able to pull it off. Oh, shoot. Yeah, 1990.
It was that year where I was asked what my last name was, and I was like, my last name? What? I have multiple names? What is this?
Because you were 5? I'm trying to remember. I think this was the year I started kindergarten.
Yeah, that's
like the fall of 90.
Yeah, they actually had a little interview with me before they would let me in, and they asked me what my full name was. And I was like, it's like my mom's this person.
This is my mom. She knows all the rest. Oh man, yeah.
it was that year I first saw that. What was that giant bouncy ball thing people sat on and they bounced around?
Oh, what were those
And I was
called? Weren't they
like,
just called like Bounce Its or something? Where you had like the handle on it,
oh yeah,
and
and
they
I was
and
like,
then kids had Skip Its.
oh yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember thinking to myself, I don't have what it takes to ride on one of these things.
And if you were like from a really wealthy family, you had a Skip It that had the counter on it,
Oh god,
and it's like, oh
I
man, I'm
remember
up to
those.
125. Oh man, what a year! What a year! So yeah, here we
Yeah.
are. How we're gonna do this is we're gonna kind of hit on some of our favorites of this year, but I think we're also just gonna kind of give a rundown because first off, there is a handful of sequels that came out this year, like number two sequels, and in a lot of cases, the movies were also number two, as in poop.
Oh yeah, that's enough about Edward Scissorhands,
Yeah.
right?
No, well, that wasn't a sequel,
No,
or was it?
I said that was a reference to number twos.
Oh yeah, that's. So Dakota, what's a movie that when you thought about this year or whatever you did, looked it up to remember what even came out that year? What was one that kind of struck you first to be like, oh my gosh, I love that movie?
Well, right away, the first thing that I just remembered was, all right, brace yourself, Pretty Woman.
Yeah.
And I say that because of my mom, I have seen this movie more times than I can count. Like if it was on TV, this is what we were watching because we kind of watched something together at night,
Oh sure.
and then my sister just thought it was like the greatest movie of all time, and yeah, so it's like I was an impressionable kid and I was forced to sit through the movie. And you just after a while you don't question it. It wasn't until later I was like, wait a minute, Julia Roberts' character was a hooker.
Yeah.
Why does nobody care about this fact?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a bizarre movie when you think about it, but you're right. It felt like the people who had the VHS movie collections, people who actively bought movies, this was on every person's movie shelf.
Oh yes,
You always saw Pretty Woman, and you always saw fake Julia Roberts on the cover because we all know that that was a model with her face. But
but yeah, I like I said, I've seen that, and it's not. I don't hate the movie, and it's not a bad movie. I think it's as far as it's just a kind of. I think of it as being kind of weird. Like this is supposed to be a love story, but he's kind of buying her. And
yeah, I guess they're supposed to be like, well, you're okay with it because they're both mostly nice people, and then they end up falling in actual love, and so I guess you're okay with it. I guess, but it's still very bizarre.
yeah, um,
But
probably one of the few movies that Jason Alexander was in that you could actually say, "Oh, that was a pretty good movie."
where he was in it and it was good.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't know what you're talking about because I'm pretty sure he was in Dunstan Checks In, and
he
that's a
was.
quality movie, Dakota.
When your Mount Olympus has shallow hell in it, you might be in trouble as an actor. I'm just saying.
Oh, shall there's a funny movie. Now here we go. We're just gonna keep going down this rabbit trail. But there's a movie where it's like there's another what the heck movie where it's like at the time it was a huge hit, and it was like this movie's really weird. And so yeah, Pretty Woman was hitting that look back. This movie's really weird bar even sooner though. So what else? What other movies from that year struck you outside of obviously your history with Pretty Woman?
Yes. Well, the one that probably my inner child was just like, oh my gosh, that's the year Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came out.
Yeah, yeah,
Because just like every other, I don't know, I'm speaking as a former, uh, as a boy, like if I just heard that TM and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle theme, I would just freak out and like gotta, where's that sound coming from?
It, and
And when
it's a good movie too.
oh yeah, and it's, people kind of harp on the fact that the actors are wearing foam suits, but it's like this holds up a lot better than those two Michael Bay produced movies. I mean, especially the second one.
Yeah, and I think there's something you can forgive. Well, there's two reasons you can forgive it. First off is maybe just childhood memories, but I think the other thing that makes it forgivable is just the fact that they are there. And I know they did motion capture for the Michael Bay ones
Yeah.
and stuff, but it just wasn't. I don't know. You don't buy into it because even if you want to compare motion capture like Gollum in Lord of the Rings, I thought was a lot more of a buyable done CGI motion capture, but there's just something special about in that original Turtles where they are there and just those Jim Henson little robotic movements of the eyes and mouth, you kind of get sucked into that world. Your imagination kind of takes you right in.
Yeah, I rewatched this not too long ago, and I was kind of surprised at how gritty the film looks.
Really, yeah, it really does. It really does.
It's a bit like New York just looks like crap, and it makes sense for these turtles to be out fighting crime in a world like this.
Yeah, right.
Where it's just people are getting mugged in the parking lot, and you have vigilantes fighting vigilantes, and
Real, yeah.
And the voice acting, I was just struck at how you really, really believe these were the turtles that you kind of fell in love with from the cartoon, because the people who they got to do the voices really sold it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the downside of the recent ones is they just found the most bland people possible and tinkered with their voice and put it in the movie, and it's ugh.
Right there, I know what you mean. Though there's something special about the voices done in this one, where they they capture you, and even with your eyes closed, you know who it is, and yeah, it's just and I mean, yeah, this movie is interesting in the fact that they do fight pretty. I mean, they go for it with swords and
oh yeah,
and well, and in a way, wasn't it kind of an independently made movie? I mean, I know there was some backing, but it was still made kind of, it wasn't like it was a big studio production or anything. And you hear you hear the horror stories of the guys passing out in the suits, because those suits were what, 1,000 pounds or something, I think.
Oh yeah. Well, it wasn't like Tim Burton's Batman, where they had all this money and just the studio was okay, you gotta have this and that.
Yeah, and it was ultimately released by, wasn't it under the New Line?
Yeah.
And New Line's always been kind of a rogue studio. They kind of have it go by the beat of their own drum, which is ultimately what got Lord of the Rings made too, where they were yeah, we'll do it. And
then
so
that gave them the license to print money, basically.
Yeah. But yeah, what's interesting about the history of the Turtles movies is that in Secret of the Ooze, the second one, there's a lot less violence.
Yeah.
And I was there a lot of parent? I understand there was a lot of parent feedback. This movie was too violent, and so they toned it back to a point where it made the second one kind of blah.
Yeah, in the second one, Leonardo doesn't even draw his swords out.
Yeah, he literally has swords on his back.
There for decoration.
Yeah.
And, there's just so much to like about this movie. I mean, especially as a kid, you're just oh man, you just can't fall any harder in love with this movie. It's got everything you want, turtles eating pizza. And,
yeah, just the stretchiest cheese too. It just stretches for days.
They got kind of the weirdest actor to play Casey Jones, and he sold it.
He absolutely sold it. Yes.
Yeah.
God, what's his name? Martin? No.
Elias Koteas?
Elias Koteas. Thank you. Yeah.
I wasn't sure how to pronounce his name.
And he's still proud of this movie. That's what I love about it. He's still we'll get asked about it, and he's just still absolutely proud he was part of it, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm gonna throw this out there. When it comes to Splinter, I'm gonna use a quote from Bumblebee.
Okay.
There's a quote from Bumblebee that
Bumblebee
says,
the movie.
yes, the Transformers movie that came out a year and a half ago. And the quote goes, he's more human than you'll ever be. And I'm looking at you, Michael Bay produced Ninja Turtle movies.
At least he had Tony Shalhoub. It had something going for it.
Yeah.
But who did the voice of Splinter in this
Oh,
old one? It was kind of I mean, he was a guy you'd recognize, wasn't it?
if you're thinking of the guy from Conan, he did the voice on that cartoon movie they made.
Oh, maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Well, the what was he was on Bridge on the River? No. What am I thinking of? Crap, I can't remember. It's been a while. Mako. If you're thinking of Mako, he was the voice in the.
I think that's what I'm thinking of, but he was in the animated.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was sadly his last movie.
Oh, okay. But yeah, Turtles. It's still a fun movie. And yeah, you can never go wrong having that as a movie night. So, I mean, I guess you can if I don't know, someone's afraid of reptiles. I don't know, but yeah, for me, when I kind of thought about this year, I mean, you have some obvious ones, but one I kind of forgot came out in 1990 was Tremors.
Oh yes,
I always feel like that movie's like more of like a 93, 94 movie that it was this old. But gal, I love that movie. I love everything about Tremors. It's just the right kind of schlock for me that the movie seems to be a little bit aware. It's like what I think everybody wanted the Meg to be, but the Meg ended up like trying to be like a serious movie too often.
Yeah.
And Tremors kind of kept remembering and being self-aware that it was a comedy also. And boy, did that play to its benefit. And I think that's what really kind of ended up hurting the Meg.
Yeah.
Was it kind of got overly, like, it got a little self-serious about what it was. But
I'm kind of surprised that this was a 1990 movie, because there's a little bit of CGI when they're representing like the graboid kind of traveling through the dirt. Isn't that supposed to be CGI?
I know what you're talking about, those shots where it's like pushing through the dirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it must have been done on a computer, because I don't know how else they would have pulled that off in 90, and it doesn't look like weird, let's throw dirt at a camera and we'll green screen it. It doesn't look like that either. And so it must have been some sort of animated is how they did that, which most likely leads to probably a computer. But the other thing, too, is where I don't know what the budget was of this movie, but it must have had a little bit of a budget, because the actual graboids, I mean, those couldn't have been cheap to make. I mean, they're all robotic. I mean, they must have been all robotics and puppetry that they would have had to make those things and then chop them up and have the nasty blood coming out. And I don't know. It's just a fun movie. I mean, Kevin Bacon, Fred Ward, Reba McEntire, Stephen Gross. I mean, who would put those people in a movie together? Yet somehow it turns into a real fun movie. So, man, yeah. I mean, obviously it has a bazillion sequels and TV shows and things that are, well, at best subpar. But
yeah,
we always have this original.
It is pretty kind of unappreciated, and for such a well-made movie, it's just
because this first one, it is well done, and everybody in it is given 100%. I mean, I remember even a kid, I knew that Reba was a singer, in that, but I thought she was so cool in this movie when I was a kid, like that whole basement scene with her and Stephen Gross in their gun locker room, basically. I mean, just fun stuff. There's another moment in the movie that must have been some sort of CGI thing too, when a station wagon is getting pulled underground, and it pulls back, and you see like headlights pointing up into the air, as they're kind of show representing it going down the ground. But I bet that had to have been done by computer too. So yeah,
Yeah.
maybe this was one of those early CG movies too. But that was one that stuck out to me right away is Tremors. In fact, we even have a versus episode where I have Jaws versus Tremors just because they are my second favorite movie monster. Besides, Jaws is number one, and then I would put the Graboids at number two. So,
Oh, nice.
and then Godzilla, just because I love Tremors so much. So, yeah, Tremors. But yeah, and then I don't know what were some other ones that stuck out to you before I go into some of the funny sequels I realized came out this year.
Goodfellas came out this year, but
Yes, Goodfellas.
I always think of that as an '80s movie. It feels very much kind of that time, I guess.
Yeah, the other movie that came out this year that feels very 80s, but came out in 1990 was Total Recall.
Oh yeah.
I mean, if any movie that came out in 1990 feels 80s, it was probably Total Recall and then maybe Flatliners, because that's another one that felt pretty 80s that came out in 90. But I think Flatliners probably just felt 80s because of the fact that it starred a lot of the Brat Pack people, or people that were coming out of that label, I guess, so to speak, of being called the Brat Pack.
Yeah,
So,
I haven't seen Flatliners in so long. I remember maybe the first 30 minutes of it, and then after that it's just, oh yeah, this thing happens and they're doing the thing, and yeah, it was just a movie, I guess.
yeah. It's just hilarious though because I guess just when you look at the movies of this era or of this year, like almost every one I see that came out this year was on TV constantly when we were kids. Like Total Recall, Pretty Woman, Edward Scissorhands, Turtles, Back to the Future 3, Flatliners, Hunt for Red October.
Oh, was that 1990?
Yeah, Hunt for Red October was another 1990 movie that you feel like was an 80s movie. But again, I think it was just because these movies were basically being filmed in the 80s. They just came out in 90. So, yeah. But in Dances with Wolves, a lot of people call that the upset movie that beat Goodfellas at the Oscars. Whether that's fully the case or not, who's to say? I don't.
People that make kind of do these kind of complaints, like people are still up in arms about the whole, Saving Private Ryan didn't win.
Yeah.
Something to remember is the great movies that you remember years down the road. A lot of them not big Oscar winners. Like how many Alfred Hitchcock movies? Like, oh, it just swept the Oscars. Practically none of them.
Yeah.
A lot of Stanley Kubrick movies completely just ignored by the Academy Awards, and it's like, we still kind of put these movies up on a pedestal, and they're like, oh man, that is so great. Why can't more movies be like this? Yeah, so it's people just need to get used to that fact that some movies win, and in some ways it's like a game.
Sure. Yep. Well, it is.
That explains Crash. That's how Crash won.
Yeah.
Well, Academy Award.
And again, the thing with Academy Awards and things like that is movies are essentially, well, they are an art form, and it's like here we're as a group deciding what's the best art. And it's like, well, art is kind of one of those things where it's kind of more personal. Like the fact that both of us love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles so much, somebody else is like, that movie's garbage, but it's because of the way we saw that art when we were kids. It imprinted on us differently, And so I mean, you're judging art, which is always a tricky thing to do too. But I think we need to like just slow down a second, talk about Dances with Wolves a minute, because we are in South Dakota. This movie is a big deal in South Dakota because it was like one of the few movies that really got big that was filmed in our state. Where are you at with this movie, Dakota? What's your history with Dances with Wolves? Are you a fan? Were you a fan? Are you still?
Um, I think it's okay. I think it's just a little too long.
Yeah,
Uh, and don't get me wrong, there's some really good acting in this. There's some I think great scenes, but it's just oh man, this movie is overly long. Like, could he have trimmed a
it could
few
have
parts?
easily been trimmed. Yes, I agree with you there. In fact, most of what you're saying is kind of where I'm at with it. It's like it's a very it's an easy movie to watch in one sense because it's a good movie to look at, but it just goes on. You
Yeah,
know, I mean the buffalo hunt scene is an outstanding scene. You know, it's iconic. Uh, but then there's just a lot of scenes where that really didn't need to be there, and or that could have been trimmed. uh, and I don't know.
um,
It's one of those weird things where it's like a lot of people forget that the book it's based off of was first and foremost kind of a romance novel,
yeah.
which it's like, man, I wish they would have maybe picked a better thing than a romance novel to do a story like this on, but I don't know.
You
What are you
know,
gonna do?
speaking of which, this movie kind of caused some accidents back in my neck of the woods. Just people emulating actions in this movie. I know quite a few guys, older men. Obviously, I was still just a child at this point, uh, who injured themselves. They were on horseback and they were hunting, and they tried they tried to run down their prey and shoot it at the same time.
Oh no.
This is
Oh,
also how I learned that you have to train a horse to accept the sound of a gunshot.
right.
You know, a
Yeah.
horse is a prey animal. It sounds like a gunshot's going to spook it.
Yeah.
These are not the thoughts that were flying through these guys.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, I had an uncle, a cousin, and just a couple other people that tried to because they saw this movie, like, man, that's so cool. Imagine if I just rode down this animal and killed it that same way. And yeah, they spooked the horse. The horse just went wild, threw them off, and they all either had got hurt some way, some form or another. And it's crazy. It's like you hear about this stuff like that stupid movie with Sandra Bullock on Netflix. What was it? The where they blindfolded themselves. The
Oh,
Birdcage Challenge.
Bird Box.
Yeah, the bird box sound, the bird cage. What am I thinking?
The Birdcage. That's a very different movie.
Yeah, but it's just you hear about that and you're like, oh, that is so stupid. It's like, oh, this is back before we had YouTube,
Yeah.
so it's like nobody like. Thank God, because I think people would have been trying to record this and just it probably would have gone worse.
Oh yeah. It would have been like when everybody was trying to mimic what they saw in Jackass, and then there were kids breaking their
Uh,
legs and arms, and then parents were mad at the show. It's like nobody's recommending you do this, people. I mean, look at the guys on the show. So yeah, but yeah. I mean, again, it's not a terrible movie, and it's kind of one of those where when you think about it, it totally makes sense that that would be the movie that would win an Oscar.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, I have to say that I feel like Kevin Costner made an all around better movie with Open Range. I just think that that movie's outstanding and is kind of forgotten about.
you know, I'm gonna put this movie there. I kind of have a category for movies like Dances with Wolves and um, kind of some other movies that are in there. Ten Commandments. Even though I like the movie, I just feel like it's overly long. Gone with the
Yeah,
Wind, great movie,
yeah,
but way too long.
yeah. It's unfortunately long. Yeah,
And yeah, God, what's the one I'm thinking of with Peter O'Toole where he's in the desert?
Lawrence of Arabia. There's
Yeah,
some
that was.
very long scenes in that movie too. Yeah, I think a movie for me that probably could have been tightened up that was very long would have been the Civil War movie. That another a movie probably a lot of people have forgotten, but Gods and Generals. It was kind of
Oh,
a prequel to the movie Gettysburg, and it was like a good solid 4 hours long. And granted, it covered a lot of ground. 2 years of Civil War, but it's kind of like it probably could have been tightened up. So
yeah,
like you could have kept this to 3 hours for sure. So
yeah. It was a labor of love though of Ted Turner. I mean,
yeah, it really was. Well, in the the writer director who also did Gettysburg, it was really like yeah, it was a labor of love for him, and I think he's still kind of bummed he didn't get to make the one for the other side of Gettysburg. But it's the way it
yeah.
goes. But as far as 90, I mean, even though Back to the Future 3 isn't quite as liked by certain people, it's still a pretty iconic movie that I think to a certain group of people is their I say this carefully, is their favorite Back to the Future. And I don't know where are you at with Back to the Future 3?
Oh man. Oh, I don't really care for it. It kind of seemed like a novelty, like they did it as a novelty. Like, let's go back to the old west. Um,
Yes. It almost felt more like an anthology than yeah, in some ways where it's like, let's just play with that DeLorean time machine world. Now we'll go to the West or something. Yeah.
like, I yeah, I don't know. I think it's okay. I think the ending is kind of just a little too like leaves me going, huh? But yeah, I don't have a.
Yeah. You
I'm
just
not one of those people that feels like they have to rag on it.
yeah, and it's kind of like I mean I enjoy it. I mean I enjoy it for what it is or whatever, but yeah, it's I think the ending is kind of maybe problematic in some ways, but you kind of are just happy that Doc Brown had a happy ending. And so you're just kind of like, well, I'm glad Doc's happy. And he's kind of let it go. Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's kind of like, it's funny because it's one of those movies where there's this certain group will say it's like their favorite. And then there's the other side of people will just say they absolutely hate it. It's trash. It doesn't exist. And it's like, well, if you're going to go that far, let's not bring up the fact that part 2 is basically a complete redo of the first movie, which I know they did on purpose. They did that on purpose as kind of a self-aware gag, but yeah, it's kind of I mean, none of them are perfect, but they're still fun movies, I mean, the first one he's getting seduced by his mother, so that's the weirdest thing in the whole series, and it's in the one that people love the most typically.
yeah, it was.
So
Yeah, it was a weird time when you get away with stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, it really is because you wouldn't be able to do that now.
I know when the Me Too movement started, people were looking back on the first one and kind of talking about a certain scene in it, which I'm gonna just not talk about. But it's weird, like kind of how certain attitudes of the day will change your outlook
Yeah,
on scenes from movies. But oddly enough, I'm a little surprised nobody's kind of critiqued Shaka Zulu with that same kind of perspective, you know?
yeah, and I think it's probably just because not as many people know or recall that movie.
Oh man, I watched it on the History Channel. Back when they liked doing history related stuff.
Yeah, which now that the pandemic's going on, the History Channel is showing a lot of movies again.
Oh wow, cool.
But I mean, they're not all maybe great movies, but they are attempting
You
to
know,
show historical movies again.
I do remember they had a Danny DeVito movie about Jimmy Hoffa, and thinking back on it,
Yeah.
I do remember probably being more entertained by that than I ever was throughout The Irishman.
Yeah. That's funny. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Because didn't DeVito, isn't he the one who kind of got that movie made?
yeah, it starred Jack Nicholson and Frank Whaley showed up in it briefly at the end. It's kind of uh, the film basically implies that he was killed by a hitman and was taken away and disposed of, which is probably really what happened. But
Well, and that's kind of what Irishman implies, too, in one sense. That it was a hitman. And they just made it a whole best friend story. But, yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, so let's see, 90. I mean, obviously there was Edward Scissorhands. I mean, I don't know. My no comment for me on that movie. It is what it is.
we have never really gotten to talk about this, but I used to be a huge fan of the of Edward Scissorhands and a lot of that director's movies. I used to think, oh man, this is so great, like his style and just what this movie's trying to say. Maybe it's because I was young and I don't know, foolish, I guess is what the word I would use.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think there is something to say here. I mean, because he's basically Tim Burton in all of his movies really deals with kind of the same idea. The main character is typically an outsider who doesn't fit in, because that's kind of how he feels, I think, in his life. But this one, I don't know. It's just like it always kind of blew me away how much people just fell in love with this movie, because I find it, I don't know, it just gives me a weird feeling when I watch it.
I don't know. It's just it's quaint. It's very quaint, and I think the fact that it just has a really simple story. Well, in terms of the actual story, I'm not talking about the Edward Scissorhand character.
You're right, though. Yeah, the actual story is kind of a very simple, straight story. Yeah,
and it's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of like almost a modern fairy tale, like one of those movies.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what Big Fish was, or at least what it tried to be. It tried to be like this modern fairy tale.
True. Yeah, it's very true. Yeah. Do you think Edward Scissorhands accidentally gave birth to the goth movement?
I am actually pretty sure it is, yes.
It just feels like this movie came out in 90, and then by the mid-90s, there was a lot of goths.
Yeah, black leather kind of made a comeback.
Yeah, thankfully nobody started covering their hands in blades, but
I think it made scars come back into fashion.
Yeah.
Oh, you got a scar on your cheek. Cool.
But yeah, I think there's one movie this year that I would like to bring up that I feel like is kind of a forgotten gem, I guess is a term that gets thrown around a lot, and that's Awakenings. With it was a Penny Marshall directed movie starring Robin Williams and Robert De Niro.
Oh man,
based on a true story.
Yeah, this is actually I think Robin Williams kind of had those movies that they're not as widely acclaimed as some, and I think it's because their endings are just such downers.
They're kind of this isn't one you watch to necessarily be super uplifted at the end, but at the same time, it's also not completely bleak. But yeah, it's an interesting movie, especially when you think about who's in it and who it was directed by. It's just very different for all of them. Well, maybe not so much for Robert De Niro. He was always throwing himself into roles and dramas, but this was kind of in that era when, like you said, yeah, Robin Williams is kind of trying these turns in dramas. But then the fact that Penny Marshall directed this, I mean, her only other movie that maybe would be even close to being serious is A League of Their Own, maybe. I wouldn't necessarily put her in the category of one who made a lot of like real serious dramas, so to speak, as much as this one is. But it's a really interesting story, and I think it's a really well done movie. About I'm trying to remember what these people even had, but they were people who basically their brains were shutting them off from the world,
Or
and
wasn't that something to do with polio?
yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. Is it was it polio caused? Oh
Yeah,
man,
I want to say yes because they harken back to when he was a kid because the main, well, not the main character, but this character who gets woken up out of this kind of coma, he's he missed a lot. Like he missed was it kind of World War II, the whole 50s, 60s. He basically kind of just slept through, and he talks about how he's with like a childlike wonder about how he's
yeah,
everything he's gonna get out there and make up for.
yeah, because kind of what happens in the movie is Robin Williams become obsessed with you know why the movie's called Awakenings is essentially waking these people up from their states, and that's what happens. And yeah, Dakota, that's exactly what it is. Like they have this childlike wonder of the world because they're experiencing everything for the first time, and so it's one of those movies that's serious and sweet and heartbreaking. It's just kind of all those things, but it's a really well done movie. If you're
Oh
just,
yeah.
if you're just looking for like an a really good story with good acting to watch, and you're okay with maybe having a little bit of a meditative state that you need to be in afterwards and ponder, because yeah, not everything works out in the movie, so to speak, without totally spoiling everything. And so, yeah, that was one I wanted to make sure I brought up when I saw that this was a 1990 movie, because yeah, it was a good one. Let's see what else we got here as far as popular movies. Miller's Crossing. I don't really have much history with Miller's Crossing.
I vaguely remember it. That's all.
Yeah, it was a big movie, but it's one I don't have any attachment to or really know about. Godfather Part 3.
Oh yes, that classic movie.
The movie where Godfather fans try to justify this one a little bit, where they kind of go, well, at least we got it. We got a little bit more of the story. And
People come down on this movie a lot. They talk about how horrible it is, but it's just it's just okay. Like I don't understand where all the hate for this comes from.
I think it's because the first two are put up so high as being like arguably like which one's better? They're both the best. And then you kind of have when you have two predecessors that are considered that, if your third one isn't equal to or greater, it's just going to get thrown out, and that's kind of what we saw happen there. So
on the plus side, people were so negative against Sofia Coppola. She only directed from here on out.
She did, which I don't really think too highly of her as a director either. I don't really care for me.
Oh, okay.
So, but yeah, there you go. Good for you, Sophia. Good for you. There was Ghost, came out this year. Boy, that movie got huge. Got Whoopi more attention for being. It almost kind of made her an A-list actress, I guess.
Yeah, this movie is basically responsible for that song from the '50s being burned in everyone's consciousness.
Unchained Medley, and then also making Potter Wheels sexy. So it's always that too. Now to get into a few of the twos that came out this year, we have Die Hard 2, Die Harder. You always have to say that subtitle because it's so stupid. Die Hard.
It's all. I always thought it was unfortunate that they dropped that. Advertising this movie later on. It's just Die Hard 2. That's it. There's no subtitle.
Yeah, because I feel like by keeping in Die Harder, it reminds you that, hey, it's okay if you don't like this one as much as the first one. Because honestly, it's still a fun, good action movie, even though it's definitely not as good as the first one. And so I feel like by having that Die Harder, it's kind of giving you that, oh yeah, I got to remember that this isn't quite as good, but that's okay. This one's directed by Rennie Harlan, and he's no John McTiernan.
Uh, it's thinking back on this movie. It's weird that William Sadler is like kind of the main villain.
Yeah, there's a
Isn't that
couple weird things in this movie. That would be number one. Like, who would have thought he would be the main villain? Yeah, like that.
It's like
That's the way they would go.
And I feel like that scene where he's in the hotel room, he showed up and they're like, "Man, this dude's really fit. Let's just have him be naked."
Yeah. How about he just stretches and does martial arts moves in his stretching, just buck naked? Like, strange thought, but okay.
And then there's a weird cameo from Robert Patrick in here.
Yes.
One of the terrorists.
Yeah. I always, wonder what the deal with it. I mean, I guess he was still maybe like, would have been an up and comer still at this point? He would have been, because when was he the T-1000? Was that would have been after?
Yeah.
So I guess he was still kind of moving his way up. But I feel like the other weird casting in this is I can't stand Dennis Franz in this movie. He is so annoying. He nearly wrecks this movie for me. I just can't. I can't handle him. It's. I never got the love of NYPD Blue because of that too. I'm like, who likes this guy? It's just, I don't know. He just kind of, he looks like he should be the bad guy, and they're always making him a cop.
I feel like his career would have probably taken a different trajectory if, what's his? He's another Dennis. He was in, he was in Manhunter. Dennis Farina.
Oh, Dennis Farina.
It's like he was getting the role. Dennis Farina, of course, was like getting the tough cop roles, and then he was basically like reaching for the crumbs almost.
Yeah, Dennis Farina also had a little bit more going for him though, in that he kind of had that. He kind of looked like a charming guy, maybe in kind of a soap opera type way, but he kind of at least kind of had a certain kind of charm to him that Dennis Franz just doesn't have. So, but yeah, I mean, this is a lot of crapping on Die Hard 2 maybe. I still think it's a fine movie. But I like Die Hard with a Vengeance too, and I don't know where people feel or sit on that movie, so I don't know.
Yeah, no one likes the last two though.
Yeah, Die Hard 4, I can be a little bit of apologetic for that movie where I'm like, I'm okay with it, but yeah, 5, yeah, it's okay if that one's gone. Gremlins 2, the new batch.
Oh, yeah.
Dakota, where are you at with this movie?
I love this movie.
Okay, yeah. It's kind of a masterpiece. In a weird way.
I just love how this movie just satirizes itself, and it's directed by the same director, no less.
Yeah.
And you some people might think, oh well, just make a follow up to Gremlins, but no, he put like a lot of thought into this and just kind of satirize everything, and
a lot of bizarre thought.
Like Leonard Maltin's in this reviewing the first Gremlins, and he gets attacked by Gremlins.
He gets killed. That is arguably the best cameo in movie history. Is that, and do you know the history there with that?
He famously.
They're best friends.
Oh, I thought it was
the director. I'm blanking on it. Joe Dante.
Yeah.
And Leonard Maltin, they knew each other for forever.
Oh.
And Leonard Maltin he always tries to like not befriend directors because he knows that makes it hard for him to honestly review. But he knew Joe Dante before the directing came. And so when it came to giving his review of Gremlins, he's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I hated it. And so he realized, he's like, I'm just going to have to go on Entertainment Tonight and be honest and just apologize to Joe that I'm sorry that I just had to give my honest opinion. It actually caused a little bit of a rift in their friendship where Joe Dante, it was kind of hard for him to forgive Leonard Maltin for that. But then he called him and said, would you like to do this for Gremlins 2? And Maltin was like, yes, I'll do it. Like, he was like, and he feels like that was Joe Dante's therapy was having Leonard get killed in Gremlins 2. And I think all of that, like, real life history of it just makes that cameo even all the better. Because when he came in to do that cameo, Leonard Maltin was like, well, what do you want me to say? And he's like, just give your actual review. It seemed like you knew what you wanted to say then. I just think that just makes it even greater. But this movie, you're right, is just the self-aware satire is it's hard to, you could almost say, will it ever be topped? Could be the question you ask, and the answer could be like, it's hard to think that someone could top how good it was done in this movie.
Yeah, of course we're always hearing about how they're gonna make a third one, but
yeah,
ship kind of sailed on that one.
I feel like it has, because I feel like Dante, it would have to be Dante, and I think he's the one who kind of even maybe pulled the rope off the pier and let the ship sail, you know, where I think he was okay. Because I think the other thing too is like, you're not going to top Gremlins 2. And so it's like, why should I even bother making a movie I know people aren't going to like as much?
Yeah, maybe this movie has like a musical number. So what was that actor? He's from the Odd Couple TV show that did the voice of the kind of intellectual gremlin.
Well, wasn't it Tony Randall?
Yeah, Tony Randall was great. And then Phoebe Cates, there's a moment where she just kind of parodies herself from the first movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is going on?
Oh, man, Dakota, we need to do like a commentary of Gremlins 2, because I'm just remembering how just ridiculous that movie is.
Oh, man.
Oh, so good.
John Glover was in it.
Oh, yeah.
Being the most John Glover.
John Glover, which some of you may remember from Smallville. He was Lex Luthor's dad.
Most recently, very famously played another DC villain's dad, who's also bald. He was in the Shazam movie.
Oh, that's right. He was in the Shazam movie. He played, Mark Strong's dad. I'm trying to remember what Mark Strong's name was in Shazam.
Dr. Savannah.
Yes, yeah. Boy, yeah, he played just as jerk of a dad, too. But yeah, we better move on from Gremlins 2. Hunt for Red October, we kind of brought that up. That was a huge hit. The first of the Jack Ryan movies. What essentially started a franchise.
So is sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Was there a reason why Alec Baldwin never came back to do more?
Well, I've heard some mixed history on this. One thing I heard was that it was never supposed to be him in this movie. And so, like, I think they maybe even wanted Harrison Ford from the beginning.
Oh, okay.
And that this is one history I heard, because Harrison Ford's hard to interview, so he probably would just never, like, when they're like, so were you supposed to be in Hunt for October? He's probably like, oh, well. Because that's how he is. He just kind of grunts and stares.
Yeah, because even the actress that played the Jack Ryan character's wife, even she was different.
Yeah, because in this one it was Gates McFadden, who more people know as Dr. Crusher. and then it eventually changed to Ann Archer. Yeah, or it did change to Ann Archer in the next couple with Harrison Ford. But yeah, I don't know because, like I said, that's the main history I heard, and so I think it was kind of like, and maybe the other thing too is maybe Alec Baldwin, and maybe when this one was a hit, they did ask Alec Baldwin, and maybe he wasn't keen. I don't know.
Yeah.
Either way, this is still a pretty good movie considering uh, the Russian captain has a Scottish accent. So
I always liked how this film, he's there's that moment where he's speaking Russian, and then it kind of transitioned, and he's speaking.
yes, yeah,
I always thought that was pretty cool. Like, it was kind of their way of getting around these Russians aren't speaking Russian, and
yeah. Bryan Singer famously copied that in Valkyrie, where Tom Cruise is journaling and the voiceover's German, and then it kind of transitions over to English. And I'm like,
yeah.
hey, Sean Connery did this. But it's kind of a, I mean, I don't know if we can call it a trope at this point, but it works because then it's kind of the movie saying, please forgive us for not, making you read subtitles. I don't know. So, yeah, but that's a good, solid kind of Cold War action thriller. Alec Baldwin is actually pretty good in this movie. I know a lot of people have kind of him and haw about him at times, but Dark Man.
Oh, good Lord.
Sam Raimi's I call it Sam Raimi's audition for comic book movies. Where are you at with Dark Man, Dakota?
I was this was always kind of a guilty pleasure movie for me.
Yeah, we should probably back up. This is one people probably haven't heard about. So what Dark Man is it stars Liam Neeson, which is why you're like, wow, how have I not heard of this movie? It stars Liam Neeson. Well, you've never heard of it because it's really weird. What would be? He's a guy who ends up getting deformed.
He's a scientist because scientists are everywhere in comics.
Yeah, he's always a scientist.
He runs afoul of a gangster, which happens in comics a lot, and he's nearly killed, but he survives because that always happens. And it's just the entire movie is made out of tropes.
Which we also need to state, this was completely made up by Sam Raimi. This wasn't based on a comic book property. He just made up this character.
Yeah. Based off of this movie, I always would have thought he was like a huge fan of Batman, but it turns out he was really more into Spider-Man.
Yeah, because honestly, when you watch this movie and then either remember Spider-Man well enough or watch Spider-Man afterwards, you realize how much they have in common as far as how it's filmed and even how it looks, even though they're 20 years apart? Not 20 years.
Yeah.
Not 20 years, I guess, but 12 whatever years apart. So, but there is a certain commonness you can see between them. Even like the weird shots of, there's so many weird shots in this movie, like when Liam Neeson's like losing control of himself, where it gets really campy. And I feel like Sam Raimi really leaned into certain campy things in his Spider-Man movies too. But he tried to keep the campiness a little more tasteful in the Spider-Man movies than his usual campiness. How do you feel about him? He seems to have officially said, yeah, I have been talked to do Doctor Strange. You okay with that? It seems like that's real.
I don't know. I think he'll do fine. I honestly can't remember the last thing he did.
Well, was it that Oz movie that ended up just being like a studio film that didn't?
I always think the last thing he did was Drag Me to Hell, which was okay. I mean,
I forgot about that one. I don't know which one of those came first.
For a movie that was supposed to be kind of a horror movie, he threw in some camp in there too, and it was just a little distracting.
Yeah. You mean the talking goat?
Yeah. Well, that when she digs up the old lady's body, the old lady pukes on her, and it's
Yeah, that's right.
oh well, um, oh god, why am I forgetting his name all of a sudden? Bruce Campbell has said that he loves to torture his actors, so I think, and there's even a Bruce Campbell appearance at the end of Dark Man.
Yeah, real quick cameo. That's the fake mask Liam Neeson puts on here, where he looks like Bruce Campbell.
And then who's the love interest in this? She was in all those. She was
Frances
in like,
McDormand, wasn't it?
was it?
From Fargo. Pretty sure she's the
Yeah.
love interest. Which she always looked 50 years old. It's crazy. That woman just never had a young face. I mean,
I mean,
maybe when she was really young, but
oddly enough, Steve Buscemi is, and William H Macy too. Everyone from Fargo never really looked young.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Um, there's a couple other movies I feel like we'd be remiss not to talk about from this year. Arachnophobia, which
Ah,
I just recently rewatched a few months ago. It's still a pretty fun movie.
I feel like the exterminator from this movie should have got his own movie.
Yeah, I always forget because when you're a kid, you remember John Goodman in this movie so well. He's not in the movie very much. It feels like he's in the. It's kind of like that Beetlejuice effect, where you feel like Beetlejuice is in the movie a lot more than he is. uh, but and it's funny too because the movie will feel serious for a while because Jeff Daniels is kind of playing the movie serious, and then every time John Goodman is in the movie, this goofball music starts, and it's like it becomes like a comedy for about 3 minutes until it cuts back. It's really funny. But Arachnophobia, if you don't know, is a movie. I mean, obviously the title is Fear of Spiders, where this extremely poisonous spider ends up making its way back to a small town from South America, and then it breeds with a. I'm trying to remember. It breeds with like a local spider, I believe, and creates like this hybrid version. And Jeff Daniels plays the new doctor to town, and it's kind of a whole thing. But it's kind of one of those movies where it kind of hit that right spot of being kind of creepy and fun. You enjoy kind of watching it. Um, I feel like it's probably about the only movie Frank Marshall directed that I enjoy. I'm not a
Really?
fan of Congo.
Oh, okay.
And I'm trying to think what else has he directed. Those are the only two I can really think of right now. Even sure he's done a few others. He was kind of like he did more producing for Steven Spielberg movies, and then kind of dabbled in directing.
Yeah, this
Uh,
was Arachnophobia is the movie that made me afraid to close my eyes in the shower after I
yeah,
saw it. I was
it it creeped me out because Mimi from Drew Carey shows in this movie, and there's a scene where her and her husband die while they're eating popcorn watching Wheel of Fortune, and I remember it freaked me out to eat bowls of popcorn for a while after seeing this movie as a kid. So I'm like, what if there's a spider in here? But yeah, the other one too we for sure got to bring up is Predator 2, just because
oh
we've gone on
yes.
the record many times as saying how we are Predator fans, and yeah, Predator 2 tried to expand on the lore in a very strange movie. uh, do you? Where are you at with Predator 2? I always forget. Are you a fan of this
Uh,
movie?
yeah, I actually like it. I dare say I almost love it.
There is a lot to like in it.
Yeah, it's I hadn't seen this movie in so long, and then one day I bought like it was a movie that had the first, well, not the first three, but the standalone Predator movies, and I remember I I guess I didn't realize just how much blood and gore is in this,
It's pretty
but
gross. Yes.
it is a violent movie. Like, oh man, yeah, it's like right up there with RoboCop when it comes to violence. But I like the fact that these predators, they're basically anywhere they wanted to be. City, jungle, didn't matter to them. and the fact that they were able to kind of even hide in a city, much less, I thought was slightly terrifying. It's like, oh, even the Midwest, if it gets hot enough in the Midwest, they'll come hunting here.
Yeah, that was the one thing that was kind of. I feel like this movie kind of didn't quite know how to set up, and then when they made The Predator and had it take place in this same world, they really butchered it. Just what this future society looks like, and then they tried to like still be in that same future in The Predator, and then it made it even kind of more what's going on with how society works and what the military is.
Yeah.
But yeah, we haven't talked about too many comedies. I know we brought up Gremlins 2, but there were a few pretty big comedy. Obviously, the biggest comedy that came out this year was Home Alone.
Oh, yeah.
Another one we have to touch on. I mean, obviously,
We have to.
well, we have to. You have to acknowledge it. Somebody might freak out if you don't. Yeah, we get it.
Oh.
It's a really good movie. Everybody's seen it every Christmas forever. But yeah, as far as like other comedies, I mean, yeah, Arachnophobia and Tremors are kind of comedies in that horror. But then it's a lot of just other like really random things that haven't really held up well. Like Three Men and a Little Lady.
Oh, wow.
Kindergarten Cop still kind of holds up. I guess. Look Who's Talking 2.
I forgot they made sequels to that.
And Men at Work with the Sheen and Estevez brothers. Ghost Dad. The Witches. Mermaids. I mean, it's not a great year for the comedies, other than as far as like especially. I mean, obviously some of these I read were hits at the time, but what I'm getting up as far as like, do we want to watch them now? Not so much. Air America with Downey.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, Downey and Gibson. What they're like running cocaine out of Vietnam or something.
Yeah, I'm surprised nobody got killed for that movie because, last time somebody exposed, the secrets about the CIA running drugs, they mysteriously died.
Yeah. Well, and then the pièce de résistance of comedies that came out in 1990 was Problem Child.
Oh.
Which I always forget that Problem Child and Home Alone were the same year. Because they're, it was like two movies that were starring like this hyper kid. Well, I guess Kevin McAllister on Home Alone, he's necessarily hyper. He just has to defend his house. But, it was like these two movies that had like the kids in charge type ideas. And it's just weird how Problem Child, didn't that spawn a couple sequels?
Yeah, and then there was a very short-lived animated thing on USA. Gilbert Godfrey did the voice of the principal from the second one.
Oh, yeah.
I think someone said there was like maybe like a third or fourth movie. I don't know. But,
wow.
I mostly remember the series because Amy Yazbek was such an evil woman in the first one, and then like she came back for the second one playing somebody completely different.
Yeah, is she? I'm trying to remember. Is she the one who's in Robin Hood Men in Tights as Maid Marian?
Yes.
Yeah. She's in both of them as different people?
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever saw the second one or anything. I only saw the first one.
It was the second one, so you had to double the trouble. And they move to a new town, and he meets a girl that's worse than he is.
Oh, that's right. I do remember that premise. Yeah.
And Amy Yazbek in this one, she has glasses, and her hair is like dyed a different color, so she's supposed to appear less threatening, I guess. And actually, the dad falls in love with her because it's like, oh, just like the last woman he was married to, why not?
Of course, why not? Yeah. So, but yeah,
the first one had that actor who's kind of disgraced that was Kramer in Seinfeld.
Uh,
He plays that psychopathic murderer that breaks out of prison to see the kid.
yeah, he was in a bunch of things, and then yeah, he got disgraced. What is his name? Because are you talking about the guy who's in Ferris Bueller? Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
No, the guy that was Kramer in Seinfeld.
Oh, Michael Richards.
Yeah.
Because there was, sorry, I was thinking of, because isn't the guy who's the principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off in Problem Child? Or am I thinking of a different
Oh,
movie?
is he? Huh.
Because didn't he get disgraced now too for weird
Well, he
stuff?
was in Beetlejuice.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. I'm just kind of messing up all my random childhood
and,
movies.
yeah, he was kind of basically anything Tim Burton did. He was in right up until Corpse Bride, and then he got indicted. I'm not gonna say for what.
Yeah, not good stuff anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess we've gone over it. We've looked at things. We've filtered through the garbage. Let's pull this all together now, Dakota. So are you still saying now after jogging that memory of yours, you're still coming out saying, I think my for sure favorite one is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? I mean, I know maybe you have maybe close seconds or whatever. But
yeah, as much as I love Pretty Woman, it have to be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
yeah. And same for me, I think, even kind of jogging my memory and looking at some of these, like, excuse me, I love Hunt for Red October. I love Home Alone. I have spots in my heart for some of these. But at the end of the day, Tremors I have my biggest torch there out of these ones. So, but it's just like, look, here we are. We're over an hour. There was a lot of interesting movies this year, and we didn't even talk about all of them. But,
that would have been a good year if you were used to going to the movies like we are, because it seems like there would have always been something out that was good,
or at least something that would have been having a buzz around it. Yeah.
Yeah. Shockingly, I've realized there's very few years like that.
Yeah, as of late, especially. I mean, now there's certain franchises that always have a certain amount of buzz going, but yeah. As far as when you look and see like how many different style, these movies we talked about are all over the map as far as genre. It's not like they're just all for family or all for people like superheroes or something. Kind of a broad spectrum here. So. But yeah, so maybe we've jogged your memory on some movies you should go back and revisit, and maybe some we've recalled. You're like, well, I still never want to watch that movie again, or we have those too. So
some people may have completely forgotten there was a sequel to Gremlins,
which had the subtitle, what was it? The New Batch, right?
Yeah.
So
even though some of them looked very distinctly like previous ones.
Yeah. and that being said, you can watch Gremlins 2 without seeing the first one. There's a certain amount of carryover like you were talking about with, Phoebe Cates and things like that. But I think you would still go in and realize like, I see what you're doing here, Gremlins 2, and have a lot of fun with it.
As a kid, I thought it was great just going back to Gremlins 2 because the Gremlins break into this lab where they're doing all these genetic experiments. And Christopher Lee's there, by the way.
Yeah.
He's a scientist. But they start drinking all these potions and turning into things. Like one of them turns into a female, and another one becomes like half spider, half gremlin. And another one turns into a bat, and it breaks through the wall, and it has the outline. The outline left is like the bat symbol.
Yeah.
And I remember just losing my mind, like, oh my gosh.
They just do everything. It's crazy.
I feel like someone should have got up from Warner Brothers at that time, like, yay, Warner Brothers.
Oh man, yeah, good stuff. But yeah, so that was kind of our retrospective a little bit on 1990, a year that ended up really setting up a lot of the movies ended up being on TV for most of our childhood, I realized, Dakota. So, but we hope you enjoyed listening, and we also hope you follow us on Facebook, where we try to put up different things, whether it's movie trivia, movie jokes, movie news, And so we hope you do that. Follow us on Facebook. We also hope you subscribe to us on wherever you listen. We're available on just about every podcast app available, I believe. I haven't found one where we're not. You can always search us out and subscribe to us on there. So, yeah, we hope you do those things. We enjoy doing this, and we'll for sure bring you some more episodes in the future. But for now, we're going to bid adieu. So this is Steven.
This is Dakota.
Hang in there, people.